Pleased to welcome Brother Monte Croft. We've got him as a guest today. Multi-instrumentalist, band leader, amazing musician, wise man. That's how I know him on social media. Indeed, indeed. Thanks for taking the time, man. It's awesome to see you.
I'm really happy to be here. Flattered that you asked me, it's really
Thank
nice.
you. Thank you, man. Man, the first thing that I wanted to get your take on involves just that multi-instrumentalism.
Yeah.
Know you as a vibist, a guitarist, a chromatic harmonica player. You play drums. I think I said guitar. And I know I'm leaving some stuff out.
Bass and keyboards. I do most of my gigs on keyboards, actually.
Okay, okay. Um, Aside from like technical mastery, how do you translate your musical voice from, say, one instrument to another? Or is it even a goal to have like a unified musical personality on drums with piano or harmonica to guitar? Like, what's your take on like developing identity like across the platforms?
I think it becomes unified naturally because your personality transfers to every instrument. Uh, each instrument helps every other instrument, because it gives you a different perspective. Like playing a chromatic harmonica gave me a better handle on the linear thing
Mm,
because vibes, keyboards, there's a visual aspect to it, and I always utilize that, like from the beginning, what things look like, the shape of things. But you don't have that on a chromatic harmonica. You don't see anything. I mean, it's just you're sort of pulling notes out of the air in a sense. So I really had to focus on the linear aspect of that more so than any other instrument.
okay.
So that's how that helped. Drums helps rhythm. I mean, I think that's pretty obvious, but I guess it needs to be said. And also bass. I was talking to someone yesterday who was also, I guess, dabbling in the bass, and it was a revelation to him how strong. I mean, you know this, how strong your rhythm has to be. You have to be like a drummer on the bass. And that was a revelation to me as well. When I started playing bass around 40 years ago.
Hmm.
No, that's not right. I'm not
Oh,
that old.
okay.
Actually, I am that old, but 20 years ago.
Okay.
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 But, bass for me was always just kind of like for fun. It was
Hmm.
just a little hobby. Then I got hired to do a gig and go on the road where I had to play bass. I had to play 3 songs a night. I had to learn like 7 tunes with this band. It was the Average White Band, and any given night I had to play 3 of those tunes. So it was trial by fire, because I hadn't thought about how loud to be. I hadn't thought about how to EQ the instrument. How much low end should I have? How much high end? And we're playing these big venues. We're playing like the Greek Theater in LA, City Winery in Northern California. We're playing these big halls. But not to get off the track, the revelation for me was how strong your rhythm has to be on bass.
Mm.
Because when I first started, it was kind of rickety, man. I was like, wait a minute, this is not sounding right. You really got to be like a drum.
Mm.
So I think that probably tightened up the rhythm on all the instruments. So that's been my experience. Each instrument helps you in ways on the other instruments.
I like that. I like
Yeah.
it. I'm looking around now and I'm seeing a lot of cats, even younger than me. I'm in my early 40s now, and
Hmm.
even younger than I am, adapting this, multi-instrumentalism philosophy, trying to go
Yeah.
across you were already out there doing that years and years ago on records like, Survival of the Spirit, which was is incredible. You hear bebop, you hear Marvin Gaye, you hear, a little touch of Stevie Wonder, and all of these things. Do you feel like now the climate is right for people to accept folks, across their musical instruments? What's your take on that?
I do feel the climate is a lot better. When I first started doing it, it was still kind of like frowned upon. It's like jack of all trades, master of none, and
Mm,
don't do this R&B flavor on a jazz record.
mm,
And now it's common. It's accepted. The multi-instrumental thing is relatively common, and I saw that coming. I said it years ago. I
mm,
said multi-instrumentalism will be commonplace eventually, and it's
mm.
pretty much there now. I mean, most people you think of play two instruments at least, are competent on two instruments and more. But yeah, the environment is completely different, and also there's so many niche markets, for lack of a better word. It's kind of like anything goes now,
Okay.
which I think is good. I mean, because it frees you up. You don't have to worry about it's so ironic that a Stevie Wonder vibe would be frowned upon. But I remember getting like this really bad review because I
Mm,
had like a Stevie Wonder energy on a tune on a record.
mhm, mhm.
It's like, wow, that's really rigid kind of way of thinking. So I think that's loosened up a lot, and that's great. You know.
Right on, right on. When you hit the scene originally and took the opportunity to be, with Columbia and that kind of thing, was
Yeah.
that something that you really had to push for or fight for? Like, how strong was that Young Lions thing that you felt like you had to
Ooh.
undo, or I'm really curious about that.
Yeah. Let me try to paint the picture.
Uh-huh.
So I had been working. I came to New York in 1983,
Hmm.
and my plan was, okay, I'm gonna get a job,
Hmm.
9 to 5, because I still got some holes in my game. I need to practice. I need to work on the stuff that I had gleaned from my college experience at Berkeley. I got a
Mm,
lot of information, but I needed to process it still. I went back to Ohio for a year.
hmm.
Still wasn't enough time, but I had to get out of my parents' house. So I said,
Hmm.
I'm gonna go to New York. I knew about New York because we had gone there as a family. That was like our vacation, one of our vacation spots. We would go to New York
Uh-huh.
and go to the Apollo. We would see Broadway plays, go to the Garden, just
Yeah.
the whole New York thing. So I didn't have that trepidation I think a lot of young people might have about it. Plus, my uncle lived here.
Mm,
All right. So I don't want to get too far off the track, but I wanted to paint the picture for you.
sure.
So I come to New York and I do what I set out to do. I get a job. I start working at ASCAP. I did that in 1983, 1984,
Mhm.
and part of 1985. And this was a sure enough, 9 to 5, very time consuming, but you got a salary and benefits. So I was cool. I had my little studio apartment in Fort Greene, Brooklyn. And I was hanging out at night. I was going to the jam sessions. I was still like playing drums at a lot
Okay.
of the sessions,
Uh,
because they didn't have vibes in the
mhm.
venue. And slowly but surely, I started gigging. I started, as most of us do. We come here and we get rolling eventually somehow. Plus, I had a lot of friends here, and some of my friends were doing big things. So I would hang out at their gigs. I would
Mhm.
do my gigs. Sometimes I would sit in. I got a chance to do some recording. I did a early record with James Spalding, one of his first records on Muse, and that record had Ron Carter,
Wow. Wow.
Ralph Peterson, and Mulgrew, who were my peers, Ray Mantilla,
Hmm.
and James. I was used to James Spalding because I had been gigging with him.
Okay.
I knew the historical context of what he had done and all that, but I didn't take him for granted, but I was used to him. But when he told me Ron Carter was on the date, I freaked out. What?
Understandably.
One of my first records.
Yeah.
Ron comes into the rehearsal, very personable, smiling. He's experimenting. He's playing all that Ron Carter stuff. I was like, wow.
Hmm.
He was experimenting more in the rehearsal than on the record. but I guess he had to get comfortable, fill it out. But in the rehearsal, he was doing all that Miles Davis playing with the meter, and I was like, wow, this is really Ron Carter.
It's
You know,
awesome.
so we did that record, and we did it at Rudy Van Gelder's. So there was all these things, you know, like one of my first record dates. I'm thinking they're all gonna be like that.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
I haven't played with Ron Carter since.
Okay. Okay. It'll come around.
I hope so,
It'll come
man. I
around.
hope so. That would
I
be
believe
great.
it.
That would be
I believe
fun.
it. I believe it.
But so you know, I'm get back on the track. I remember the question.
That's cool.
Columbia Records. So eventually, I decided I had to leave the day gig because
Okay.
my skills were diminishing, man. Because there's only so many hours in the day, you know, and I had to deal. I didn't have a studio or anything. I had to deal with neighbors upstairs. They're complaining about me practicing. You know, that whole thing most musicians go through in New York. So I decided I'm leaving. I'm leaving to let chips fall where they may. I was gigging a little bit. I saved a little money.
Hmm.
You know, my parents said they had my back. You know, if they knew what I wanted to do. So it wasn't like a real freak out time for me. You know, it was a little scary, but it wasn't earth shattering. You know, it was something I needed to do. So when I left ASCAP, you know, part of my plan was to do a demo. So I arranged for that. I did it at Jimmy Madison's house, his drummer. A lot of people would be familiar with him.
Hmm.
He had a recording studio at his house. So I got some guys together. I got Lonnie Plaxico and
Yeah.
George Caldwell was a piano player for the demo. And Gene Jackson was the drummer.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, you know, I had written some original things. I think it was maybe 4-song demo. It's like, bet, okay, now I got my demo. I can shop this. Before I had a chance to do any of this, I get this call from George Butler, who's A&R at Columbia Records.
Wow.
You know,
Wow.
George brought Miles out of retirement, and George
Yeah.
was riding the crest of a wave of Wynton Marsalis being this superstar, you know.
Sure.
I
Sure.
mean, kids today cannot imagine how big Wynton was at this time because there's nothing comparable to that today. Because again, there's all this niche markets. You can't get that big today.
Yeah.
But it was like a real focus on him then. And
Hmm.
it was George. George was at the helm. So I get this call from George. He was aware of me because, you know, I had sat in with Wynton like in 1985.
Mm.
Branford left to play with
Okay.
Sting.
So like
So
right after the Black Codes thing, the band is kind of in flux. Gotcha. Gotcha.
Branford's gone, and
Okay.
Wynton is pissed.
Mm-hmm.
It's like,
Mm-hmm.
how could you leave me to play with this pop star? I mean, he was
Uh-huh.
like, you know, if Branford did that and he ain't about nothing, and if any of y'all do that, y'all ain't about nothing. And I'm editing. I'm trying to keep it clean. He didn't say it like that,
Sure.
but that was his vibe. So he was
Okay.
trying to put together another configuration. So he wanted to try vibes. So I went and played with him at the Vanguard.
Mm.
And, you know, it was fun and exciting and all that. But I could tell he wasn't really digging the different sound because it was like a completely different thing, you know.
Right.
And
Right.
he wasn't ready to
Right.
do that.
Mm-hmm.
I had also played with Donald Harrison and Terence Blanchard on one of their records.
Mhm.
Black Pearl was the record. And, you know, I'm telling you all this to let you know how George Butler became aware of me.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, I'm guessing we never really talked about that, but he's seeing his artists bring this vibe player around. You know?
Right.
So
Right.
he gives me this call out of the blue
Mhm.
to me. Oh, you froze for a second.
I gotcha.
So he gives me this call, which to me was out of the blue. And he said he wanted to take a meeting.
Mhm.
And in my mind, I'm like, bet, okay, I got this demo. I'm going to drop it on him. You know, the time is right. I'm going to get a deal. You know, everybody was feeling it, you know, in my circle, you know, we were like, this is it. This is it. So I went to Black Rock and I had a meeting with George and he was way ahead of me. He was like, I want to sign you.
Wow.
He
Okay.
just liked the I guess the optics of it and what he had heard. And he assumed if I'm playing with these guys that I must be on their level. This is what I'm thinking
Mm-hmm.
in retrospect, you know. But he wanted to sign me. He was ready to do it. He said, we're going to drop the contract. You got to get a lawyer. blah, 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 et cetera, et cetera. So
Mhm.
but I had my demo.
Mhm.
So I said, well, George, listen to the demo. And if you like this, let me produce my records, which
Mm.
is something none of the young cats had done. Nobody had produced their own records. So I said, well, this will set me apart from all these guys, you know.
Yeah.
So he liked the demo, so he agreed. He let me produce my records. So that's how I wound up
Mhm.
producing 2 jazz records, my only 2 records really,
Mhm.
on the biggest label in the world. He took a
Yeah.
chance, you know,
Yeah. Yeah.
and that's the whole thing. But it wasn't like, no, it wasn't like I had to aggressively pursue anything. It kind of just fell in my lap due
Mhm.
to the circles I was traveling in. Yeah,
That's what's
and the people thought that you know, the Marcellus brothers hooked it up or Harrison Blanchard hooked it up, but I had signed and they had no idea.
Mhm.
They had nothing to do with it. They didn't know I was on the label till like much after the fact, you know.
Yeah.
But that's how that whole thing went down.
Wow, man, that's really important. And I think about you in the lineage of vibes players. I'm thinking of, in the 50s, primarily Milt Jackson and Terry Gibbs. And then we have Bobby Hutcherson, and then after that, in the 70s, it's a little bit gray. And then there's you, then there's Stephon Harris, then Warren Wolf, Sasha and Joel Ross and everybody. So it's really important for you. And thank you for taking the time to do that. It shows your place in the lineage of this instrument. And I've always been kind of puzzled, 2 instruments in particular, Hammond organ and
Mm,
vibes. It
yeah.
seems like there's these gaps in players' adaptability to pick those instruments up and champion them. And now, we're starting to see gradually those instruments being played by younger generations. Why is that? Is it just the cumbersome the weight of the instrument or the availability? Why do you think it takes so long sometimes for vibes and organ to really have that next generation of adapters?
I really don't know. You know, I've noticed that too. There's a lot of vibe players today.
Mm.
I'm uh I'm seeing videos of new people all the time. I'm like,
Mhm.
when will this end?
Oh man. Okay.
No, but you know, it's exciting to say, okay, well, this instrument is it's accepted now. It's not so foreign. It should not be foreign in a jazz context, at least, you know. And
Mm.
you know, some venues actually have vibraphones now. You know, you don't have to bring an instrument. And there's a lot of organ players today. There's been a resurgence of that, as you've said. But you know, I don't really have an answer for it. I don't know why. You know, for a long time when I was coming up, it was like one guy was dominant on vibe.
Mhm.
You know, it was
Mhm.
Bill Jackson was dominant. Then Bobby Hutcherson was dominant. Then there were other like factions, like Roy Ayers had his thing,
Yeah, yeah.
and Gary Burton had another kind of thing. But it was always in the mainstream jazz thing. It was always like one guy, and even in my generation, we were carrying forth that mentality. So we were all trying to be that guy. We were all
Mm.
trying to be the next guy, you know. And when I came to New York, I met resistance from a lot of the musicians because they wanted their guy to be that guy.
Okay.
And no uncertain terms. I mean, I won't name the musician. I remember getting in a van to go to a gig with his bass player. And we had just met. He had not heard me play. And he's like, I'm sorry, man, but such and such is the cat. That was the mentality back then. You know, we didn't know each other. This is how we met. He's like, I'm sorry, man, but such and such is going to be the cat. It's like it was preordained in his mind, you know. But a
Okay.
lot, I mean, that was kind of the mentality then. Everybody wanted to
Mhm.
be that guy.
Okay.
So it's taken time to break free of that mentality. Certainly for people of my generation.
Okay.
You know, I don't think the young people come up thinking like that anymore. I think everybody's
Mm.
feeling like the more the merrier, you know.
Mhm. Mhm.
It's
Absolutely.
healthier, you know, it's healthier attitude, you know, because it was never really one guy,
Right.
you know.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. Um, and you said something in the question before that I kind of wanted to come back to and
Hmm.
pivot from.
Yeah.
Um, your first two albums, late 80s, early 90s. I kind of feel like just, outside looking in, the social media thing is almost perfect for you because there's an immediacy to the information that you can put out. You don't have to wait, you know.
Right.
And then musically, I've seen some of your late night piano and vocal, offerings.
Yeah.
It's there's an immediacy to that, that a lot of folks in your generation, even in mine, still are kind of trying to reckon with, trying to
Right.
understand. I think the pandemic has helped,
Yeah.
but I wonder, do you find this, liberating? What do you even miss about the record business pre, 2000? Is this the best time for what you're doing? Help me to understand just your thoughts on, business and putting your music out there to your audience.
Okay. Well, the advantage of the record companies, especially for a personality like mine, because everybody's different. Some
Mhm.
people are very independent. They love today because they can do it all themselves and they love the challenge of it. And I don't really have that personality.
Mhm.
I came up in, as you know, the record label era, and
Mhm.
first time out, I'm on the biggest label. This is a label I had always dreamed about being on. And all of a sudden, I was there. I was on Columbia, and it had the actual Columbia label. It wasn't a
Nice.
subsidiary. It's like,
Yeah. Cool.
what do I do after that? But I couldn't get another record deal after that,
Mm.
which was bad for me because,
Mm.
again, I'm not this independent minded person. I just do the music. That's like always been my philosophy. Probably not the best thing today.
Mm.
But
Mm.
I'm telling you honestly how I thought about it. I say, okay, I'll do the music. I need to partner with somebody who can do the business, and
Sure.
we'll make money together.
Sure.
But I could never find that person. To this day, I could never find that person.
Mm.
But the advantage of the labels was the distribution, the
Mhm.
advertising, the brand. You're connected with Blue Note. Oh, you're on Blue Note. It's
Mm.
automatically puts you in a different kind of thing in a lot of people's minds. You're on Columbia. Oh, put you in another kind of vibe.
Right.
Today, social media, yeah, it is great for me. It is great. The immediacy of it. I mean, you said the whole thing, because
Mm.
I can just show you what it is. I can just play. I can express myself, take it or leave it. This is what I do.
Mhm.
It's not what somebody said I do. This is what I do, you know.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
I'll play, as you've probably seen, I'll sit down and sing and play for an hour. I might play 20 songs in a row. I'm
Mhm.
just trying to show people, this is real. It's not a jack of all trades thing. This is what I do, and I let people know. Because I did a talk last week for Gail Boyd, and I told her how I'm like two people, and that's because the jazz people look at me one way and the people outside of jazz look at me another way. Outside of jazz for me means rhythm and blues,
Uh-huh.
soul, funk, that kind of.
Yeah.
The people outside of jazz, many of them don't even know I play vibes.
Hmm.
A lot of them don't know what a vibraphone is. I'm
Mm.
not trying to be funny. I mean, that's
I
real.
get you. Yeah.
You don't know the instrument. If I get a call from somebody from the jazz world, 9 times out of 10, I know they want me to play vibes. There's been some exceptions. I sing with Brian Blade. I've sung with Jeff Watts. Back in the day, I sung with Vincent Herring. So there's
Mm.
been these little things. I got to play some Rhodes on Kiana Linnell's album, stuff like that. But generally, if I get a call from the jazz people, it's to play vibes. I don't even have to ask.
Mhm.
But the bad part about it is these worlds don't meet.
Oh,
It's
wow.
rare. I mean, it's
Wow.
really rare. These people don't know each other. So I'm like, it's really like I'm two different people. And
Mm.
sometimes people get mad at me when they find out, I do something else, like I was hiding it from them. So it's like, I wasn't hiding it. It's just something you weren't aware of. I'm out here doing it.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, I love social media. I love it because I can express myself,
Hmm.
apart from the music, philosophically.
Hmm.
I can get my thoughts out, you know, when I never really had that medium before. Because I think in real life,
Mm-hmm.
I'm more inclined to just lay in the cut and listen to what other people have to say. And, you know, I like to observe people, you know, and I used to be like really, really shy. That's the other thing. I came out of that, but you know, this social media, it's like a new life in a way, you know. My wife was shocked.
Okay.
She's like, "Wow, it's Facebook. It's really good for you."
Mm, mm.
Kind of with a little lean on it, like she wasn't completely enjoying it, you know. Because I'd be coming from so many different places, just stream
Hmm.
of consciousness, you know. Because I
Yeah.
figure if I'm thinking some way about something, somebody else has got to be thinking the same way about it. And you need to know that people are relating to you, you know, that your thoughts are not left field, and or we can laugh together. You know, I
Hmm.
like to laugh. I like to
Yeah.
put funny things out there, you know. But yeah, it's great. In terms of the career, the social media for me, it's been good because I get gigs from it,
Hmm.
you know, and it has made more people aware of the different things that I do,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know, so that's been cool.
Yeah, that's great, man. That's great. I've gotten a lot of wisdom from you, man. I'll admit it. Like just, your stream of consciousness. And I think it's been good for me over the past 10 years to be involved as left field as some social media, can get. I think that I've been able to, peek inside the mind or at least the philosophy of a lot of cats that I admire musically, just to kind of see, what's driving them and what they're thinking about. I want to do a thing next. There are four or five artists actually that I want to bring up and just
Okay.
ask you about, your experience with them, and even more
Mhm.
specifically, um, what you felt you added to their conception when they called on you. And
Okay.
the first one is the late great Jimmy Heath.
Jimmy Heath. Wow. That whole experience was very interesting because the way I was brought into it was through the producer Carol Friedman
Okay.
and her co-producer Brian Backus.
Mm.
Yeah.
Hmm.
A lot of people know Brian from his association with Gregory Porter, Nora Jones, etc., but
Right.
he's done a ton of stuff.
Hmm.
And Carol is a tremendous photographer, and you might have some of her photos on your wall. She's
Yeah.
done a ton of jazz photos, ton of R&B photos, really iconic photos we all know. Usually kind of in a sepia tone, you know.
Okay. Okay.
Anyway, so Carol, she had a long-standing relationship with Jimmy, and she got the idea to do a ballads album. And the way I got involved in the project, she came to a gig I was doing in a village,
Hmm.
and she just loved what I was doing so much, and it was reminiscent of Milt Jackson for her. So we talked about that. I said, "Yeah, well, Milt was my hero. You know,
Hmm.
I knew him, you know,
Wow.
and
Wow.
the influence is obvious, you know." So she wanted to convince Jimmy to have vibes on his album, but he didn't want to play with another vibraphonist after Milt. And I got that. I said,
Yeah.
well, you know, I could understand it.
Hmm.
He didn't like the conception of the other cats, you know, from using
Okay.
the small mallets, the sound. He said the sound is small, et cetera, et cetera.
Huh.
So, uh, but he trusted Carol. He trusted producer. So I got on the project, but I like to say I was a maybe in a room full of definitely,
Interesting.
because it was like this undercurrent of he still wasn't sure. Because
Hmm.
and he had actually heard me play, but it was so many years before that he didn't remember. He heard me play with a Fathead Newman. I
Okay.
remember him being at that gig. I played with Fathead on a Jazzmobile, and I remember seeing Jimmy on that gig. But again, I'm so shy. I can't walk up to cats and just start. It's amazing I had a relationship with Milt Jackson at all, you know. But I just had to make that happen.
Yeah.
So anyway, we get in the studio, and I'm the maybe in a room full of definitely. The definitely is Kenny Barron, David Wong, who was Jimmy's bass player anyway, you know,
Sure.
Lewis Nash, Russell Malone, Wynton Marsalis,
Mm.
Cecile McLaurin Salvant, and Gregory Porter, although I was not actually in the studio with Greg.
Mm-hmm.
So it was another kind of pressure on me. You know, the musicians were like down. They were really supportive. They were like, "Oh, he needs to be here. This is the cat," you know.
Mm-hmm.
But it took a little convincing for Jimmy, and he was a gentleman through the whole thing. And you know, he was funny. People know, if you know
Yeah.
anything about Jimmy, he's full of puns. And
Yeah.
I mean, and he knew what he wanted. But by the time we got to the end of the project, he was writing arrangements for the two of us to be featured.
Wow. Wow.
So
That's
that was
awesome.
that
That's
was
awesome.
the happiest ending there could ever be. You know, felt
But
really validated.
in a player maybe that would not have had your experience, that was walking into that exact scenario, you know, the tendency may have been, you know, to overplay or to show them I deserve to be here. But how did you really navigate musically? Naturally, you know, you just did your thing, but was there any thought, it's like, man, I'm just, how did you conceive when you walked in the room, I'm gonna do this?
It was funny because I couldn't be myself 100% because Jimmy didn't want that. You know, at first I'm playing like I play, you know, and sometimes it's a lot of notes, sometimes it's not. I just, however I feel it, however I hear it. So we did this one take, and my chart didn't have any melody on it, but they wanted me to play on this section. I had the changes.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm listening to what's happening and I'll play. And you know, Jimmy is like, "Oh man, you playing all that double time stuff. No, let me hear some melody, man. Let me hear." I was like, "Uh-oh." And at this point, you know, I was still a strong maybe.
Okay.
So like, oh, I'll mess it up. You know, I'm the problem child now, you know. But again, the musicians were like, no, man, he's, no, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. You know, so I had to let him, well, Jimmy, you know, I don't have melody on my chart. He's like, okay. So they took me off of that tune, which I hated because I really wanted to play on the tune, you know. But that was Jimmy's vibe. He wasn't into, at this stage in his life, he wasn't into a whole lot of like double time stuff, you know, fast stuff, because he felt like people don't get that. You know, he said, you know, that's nice, but people don't get it. You know? So I would have to say I really loved the experience. I really enjoyed it. It was an honor being with all those people, but you know, it was very nerve-wracking. I was probably the most self-conscious I've ever been. Yeah, because usually I'm not self-conscious about my playing. I just do what I do. But then Jimmy had me thinking about it.
Okay.
Okay, how am I gonna play this? And also the Milt Jackson thing, I didn't want to go in there imitating Milt.
Sure.
Which is very easy for me to do, especially in that context. So I was like editing myself as I played. So yeah, I was really self-conscious, you know. But to know that he really dug what I was doing, that was the reward, you know.
Yeah.
And as we know, that wound up being his last record.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing, man. That's amazing. Another cat who's a friend of mine, and it was actually the reason that I discovered you, was Mr. Charlie Hunter. You were on the road with him. Yeah, that's my dude. But y'all had a nice hookup, man, with Willard Dyson was the drummer most of the time there, or all the time. Tell me about that experience.
I got Willard on that gig, incidentally.
Okay.
Because Charlie wanted to know, well, who are the drummers? Because he was still new to New York at that point. So I brought in some guys, you know, and Willard was a good fit. So we set out on the road, you know, the Three Amigos. What do we call it? His band was called Pound for Pound. And he had done a record and he was on Blue Note. So Blue Note was trying to like sell Stefan to everybody. So Stefan wound up playing with Charlie. He did the record, but he couldn't do the tour. So enter Monte, you know. And Charlie goes on the road as opposed to touring.
Sure.
Charlie's thing is a little on the rough side, you know, a lot of driving,
Yeah.
you know, band members driving.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just four of us on the road manager and the band.
Mm-hmm.
And he was really open about letting me express myself, you know. And he was really respectful and almost reverent, you know. Like, you don't have to be all that, you know, because he's amazing, you know. He's like a genius, you know. At that time, I think he was playing 8-string guitar,
Mm-hmm.
3 bass strings and 5 guitar strings, and it wasn't a circus act. I mean, it was something he could really do. I mean, on the sound check, I would just start playing a tune, and he would fall right in, and he's playing the bass lines and filling in the chords and soloing. I'm like, man, this guy is like phenomenal. He's amazing. And you know, he had a nice following. He had his system together, you know, all throughout the country and Canada. We did some stuff up there. And that was 1998, the year my son was born. So I had to leave the band for the birth of my boy. And so I pulled Brian Carrot, who's another great vibraphonist. Pulled him on the gig, and they went over to Europe.
Okay.
But yeah, nothing but good things to say about Charlie, man. Great player, genius.
Yeah.
Super nice cat.
Right on. Y'all had a great hookup, man. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Something I'm looking forward to is the recording that you've made with Brian Blade. And you were the person that revealed that. I had no idea that you guys were kind of doubling. He's got, you know, the Fellowship Project, but he also had what you term the Subterranean band, you know.
Right. Well, that's what he named it. That was the name of the group, the Subterranean Sextet.
Yeah.
And he started around 2000, 2001.
Okay.
And we did a whole bunch of stuff, but like in a really short period of time. We played in Atlanta. We did a jazz festival down there. We did Newport Jazz Festival. We played at the Blue Note on a double bill with John Schofield. We played at Smalls before Spike Wilner, you know, when Mitch was still doing it. So we did all this stuff, and then it was nothing. It just ended, you know. Brian Blade went on to be Brian Blade. You know? Play with Wayne Shorter and all the many things he was doing.
Yeah.
And like me, he has a dual identification because he sings and writes these really cool tunes and plays guitar.
Truth.
And that's real. He did one record so far like that, you know. Then he has his jazz identity. His recognition is on a much higher level than mine. So I think it's not as maybe confusing to people. I don't know. But so years were going by, you know, 2 years, 4 years, and we'd be in touch, maybe a little conversation here and there. And he'd always say, you know, I really want to play, you know, we really got to play. We got to get it together, you know, and record. And 10 years go by. So when he says this after 10 years, in my mind, I'm like, right, okay.
Yeah.
In my mind, I'm like, we're never going to play again. Playing with Wayne Shorter, man. Brian is like a star now. It's like, and he loves the Fellowship. That's his main band, you know? So it's like, we're never going to play again. Why are you don't even go there. Don't do that. But lo and behold, man, after maybe 15 years, he's like, can you do this? Can you do these dates in the studio? Can you go on the road for these dates? And all of a sudden it was real. You know, he redubbed the band Life Cycles. And when we recorded, we did a tribute to Bobby Hutcherson. We did the Bobby Hutcherson Now album.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
We recreated the whole thing.
Okay.
So that was an avenue for me to start singing with the band because his vocals on that album.
Yeah.
So we did the Now album and plus originals. So that's been in the can like 3 years now. You know, Brian has started a label called Stoner Hill. And he's got a number of projects he wants to release. And I think our project is due in 2022.
I'll be
And
looking forward to that.
I haven't heard the finished product, but
Mhm.
I think it's something really special. You know, I'm excited to hear
Yeah,
to hear it. You know.
absolutely. Absolutely. One more I
Yeah,
want to ask you.
Brian is like a shaman or something. He's got another kind of energy with him, man. He's like a real empath as a human being and a musician. Interesting energy with him, man. He's
Mhm.
special. He's a special dude.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah.
Right on, right on. And I want to ask you too about Valerie Simpson. I know you had residency at the Sugar Bar for a
Yeah.
while, and getting to play with her is another kind of high. You know, tell me about that.
The Sugar Bar. A friend of mine, Jim Hickey, got the Wednesday night gig there, which
Mm,
for them was kind of a throwaway night. You know,
okay.
they call it jazz night, but the guys weren't playing jazz really. You
Mm,
know, instrumental R&B at best. You know.
sure.
So Jim, he hired me to do a couple of the nights there. You know, kind of spread out. And then Jimmy Simpson, who's Valerie's brother, he books the place and he does the lights and the sound for the shows.
Mm,
And I think he kind of dug what I was doing. So he suggested to Jim that he put me on a regular basis. So that's how I started doing it on a regular basis. I did it for 3 years.
hmm
And, you know, man, every time I walked through that door, man, it was just so special to me because I knew the significance. I mean, a lot of the younger people, I think they don't really get it, but I knew
hmm
Marvin Gaye and Tammy Terrell records.
hmm
You know, I knew the Motown story. I knew the Diana Ross records. I knew all the Ashford and Simpson records. You know, I was like, wow, this is like, who, who else is this accessible? Who else who has reached this height in the business
hmm
is this accessible to everyone, man? That just used to blow my mind because Valerie's in there all the time. You know, like on our night, because traditionally, again, it was a throwaway night. She
Right.
wouldn't be there that often. But, you know, if you wanted to hang out with Valerie Simpson, if you wanted to be in her aura, if you wanted to breathe the air she breathed, throw there on a Thursday night. She's there every Thursday night. I mean, I was like, to me, wow, that's crazy, you know?
Mm,
So, you know, we started doing it and I put a couple of Ashford and Simpson songs in the set because the band, they trusted me. I did all the arrangements. I did all the singing. And Valerie really loved it when I did her music.
mm,
She said, "Oh, I love it when you play my songs." So I started adding more.
yeah. Yeah.
And you know, I got to sing with her a few times. Man, in 3 years, I probably sang with her 3 times. But you know, once is enough. You know, we're doing the duets. You're all I need to get by.
Oh,
Ain't
wow.
nothing like the real thing.
Wow. Yeah.
And we're singing together, man. And you know, I'm doing like the original Marvin and Tammy arrangement, and I would look at her. We make that eye contact to let her know where this arrangement was going, and she would like be right on it. We're singing the parts, man. It was just like I was on cloud nine, man. I loved it. Yeah, and I got to sit down and talk with her. You know, I had 1,000 questions for her. I didn't want to bombard her with stuff. I said, you know, Valerie, I'm going to ask you a few questions every time I see you. You know. But some nights she was really, you know, forthcoming, man. She just
Mm,
told the whole story, you know, anything I wanted to know, you know.
wow.
And
Wow.
she's really an amazing musician, you know. I asked her if I asked you to play Shoe Shoe Shine, could you do it?
Mm,
Kind of an obscure Ashford and Simpson song, you know.
mm,
She just looked at me and said, just gave me a nod. I named a few other songs like that, you know, Ain't Nothing But a Maybe. If I asked you to play Ain't Nothing But a Maybe, could you do that right now? She's like,
wow.
they got
Wow.
like 1,000 songs, man. You know,
Yeah.
I can't remember half of my songs, you know. I
Yeah.
gotta like go back and like listen and relearn my tunes. And then I asked her if she could play them in any key. And she said, yeah.
Wow.
Like it was nothing. I was like,
Wow.
I believe her. And she's
Yeah.
got such a vibe on the piano. It's just so full and strong, you know. It's kind of reminds me of Aretha in a way, the way
Mhm,
Aretha used to play piano, coming out
mhm.
of church thing.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that was I hated when that gig ended, man, because I used to just love going there, man.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm going to ask you one more question. And as we think about, you've mentioned, throughout this interview in different ways, the different tributaries, of Black music, the jazz thing, the R&B thing, the blues thing, gospel thing, even.
Yeah.
Now, as many of us are starting to accept, this term, Black American music, kind of as a unifier, not as an exclusive thing. Um, what kind of album would you make if someone called you tomorrow and says, "Hey, man, I'm the business guy, you're the music guy. What do you want to do?" What would we hear from Monte Croft, the third record?
Oh, that's a crime. Third rate. Here I am, all these years later. I should have had 40 albums by now.
Sure,
I could
sure.
have done that, but whatever, The business is what it is, and then my personality is what it is. So that didn't happen. Bam, Black American music. I did Nicholas Payton's first album.
A word, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, if that person called me tomorrow, I would say, well, we have to do a number of projects because
Mm.
I can't get it all in one project, Uh, I did some things from home that I actually listened to the other day. Some of those things are like 20 years old now. I can't believe that much time has gone by.
Mm-hmm.
But they're more, backbeat oriented, synthesizers, a lot of vocals,
Mm-hmm.
vocal stacks, that whole thing.
Yeah.
And when stuff sounds good, man, I was like, wow, but I never packaged it. I never got that stuff mastered.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't go through the whole process. I just do the music. I just recorded it. And,
Right.
I gave some copies to like friends and family. So I said, well, maybe this will be valuable one day. But so, I would do some stuff like that. I would do some stuff where I played everything. And I would do some stuff, some live band stuff, on the funky side, on the soul side. But I like doing straight ahead stuff too. I would do some straight ahead records, and
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't try to fit all of anything in one package. I would split it up. I think people are more open-minded, but I still think a lot of people don't really get jazz. They don't really get straight ahead jazz. They don't understand it with any kind of depth, like most people, I would say, So that's for a select audience.
Mm-hmm.
But I love playing straight ahead. I love playing straight ahead. I love writing in that idiom as well. So again, I'd have to split it up, And I've dreamed 100 albums in my mind, big band with strings, vocal albums, just doing standards. So all the dreams are there, but making it a reality it's a process.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. I'll get you to hang on the line for a second, but it's been my pleasure, man. Thanks for making time to chat with me today, man.
Oh, this was great. Thank you. Anytime.